I'm Jacqueline King. Welcome to my sewing space. Today I'm here to inspire and encourage the new or frustrated sewer. I thought we'd begin with a pro tip that was sent in by one of my subscribers. Remember, a pro tip is anything that will help you achieve a better professional finish, whether you're at home or in the workplace. This pro tip is concerning our curved hem on our project piece last week, our last video as we finished. I showed you at the ironing board how I prep the 1/4 inch hem, but this is what our viewer sent in. Take your handy marker and preferably a heat sensitive marking utensil that will dissolve when you put it at the ironing board. And what we're going to do is we're going to make 1/4 inch marks. So I have begun here. You can see when I get to the curved part, I'm only going to make tick marks. I want to be very accurate and consistent. So we go along, we go along. Now you can join these tick marks or not, but the idea, what you're going to do, go all the way across your hem, then go to your sewing machine and with a longer basting stitch, sit down and just run a straight stitch right on that line. What that does is it gives you a better view of what you're trying to press. And this is for the person who's a little less sure about what's the difference between a 1/4 of an inch, a 1/2 inch, 3/8 of an inch. Mark it out, sew it, then turn it up at the ironing board and press on that stitch line. Once you have your initial 1/4 inch hem folded, pressed I should say, then you can turn it again on itself and press again, and there you have it. Just makes it a little easier to have a more accurate hem. Thank you to that subscriber for that tip. We like hearing from all of you. So who is ready to finish our project? Or maybe I should say, see it finished. We are about to do our buttonholes, and that is going to be the final step to complete our garment and make it wearable. I want to say a little something about buttonholers on sewing machines. They're all different. You know that I use a vintage Singer to sew, and this is the buttonholer that comes with my 1951 2012. This works on many of the old Singer models, but it is unique to the Singer sewing machine. I'm not going to teach you how to use it, but I will demonstrate. And the point being, buttonholes do not have to be scary. If you have a manual with your machine, read that manual, go through it and practice. And once you learn to do a nice buttonhole finish, you'll forever do buttonholes without fear. What I did, here is a pro tip, to make it easier for me, I took a scrap piece of fabric, interfaced it, and sat down at my sewing machine and ran every size template through. What this does now is give me a guide for whatever I'm sewing. I choose my button, and to know which template I need, take my button and hold it to the appropriate buttonhole, and now I know which template I want to get out. It might be hard to see, but what you want is the size will be just beyond the edges of the button. So in this case, this is a 1/2 inch button. I will use the 1/2 inch template that fits in here. The next step, and you'll see more about this when I get to the sewing machine, but the next step is marking. Now, this is a very busy print. You know the project we've been working on, and I didn't think it would be easy to see, so I took a scrap piece of muslin. Keep muslin in your sewing room. It's great for all kinds of things. It's a fabric that's very inexpensive, And you won't feel bad if you ruin that, where you might feel bad if you ruin your piece you're working on. So I have my original pattern, and remember when we took this apart, we kept our buttonhole placket intact. And now we're going to mark, and this is what I did on the top. Lay the original piece down along your button placket and take a pin. For this mechanism, what I have to do is put a pin at the top of the buttonhole. If I fold this, that is the complete length of my buttonhole there. So when I mark on the band, I put the pin at the top of the buttonhole, and you'll see why when we start sewing. So all that to say, just lay it down, and at each buttonhole put a pin in horizontally, and so on and so forth. And then set that aside. So we are about to go over to the sewing machine, and I will set this up. I will show you how I set it up. I'm not going to explain step by step because, as I said, yours could be completely different. If you have a vintage singer and you have this set up, by all means go on YouTube. They're all over the place, videos about how to use vintage attachments on your sewing machines. And I'm sure Ken Moore too, and other brands. I'm just partial to Singer. Let's go to the sewing machine. All right, here we are back at the sewing machine, but not quite ready to set up our buttonholer, because just a quick mention, now that we've marked our buttonholes, we're going to take care of our pattern, and this is worth a mention to you. Take a Ziploc, fold everything up neatly, make sure you have all your pieces together, and the final thing I like to do is add a touch of the fabric of my latest project. That way, when I'm looking for the pattern that I made this with, I think, I'd like to make another one of these. It's easily identifiable in my pattern stash. So, take the time to be neat and organized. It helps. Okay, I'm about to start setting up my buttonholer. I won't go into it in depth, as I said, because your machine is probably different. I have to remove my straight stitch presser foot with its screw and begin by placing my feed dog cover. This covers up the feed dogs because the mechanism is going to do all the work pulling. And I know this has a little quirk. So what I do, I find the hole, my screw goes in, and I put my needle down. Then I know that it's in the right placement. My needle isn't going to go crashing into that. But it's got a little quirk, so I have to kind of lift this up, just use this, and that's so it will start the screw correctly. Small things are a mystery to me, very fussy, get it right. So once you get it started, then you can take that out. You notice I'm leaving my needle in, and continue until that's tight. Good, nice and snug, so that is not going to jostle. And now I lift, and let's pull up our bobbin thread through that plate. All right, we're ready to hook up our mechanism. I've chosen my 1/2 inch template that's appropriate for my 1/2 inch button. Pop the cam in. I can turn this, there. Little turn will drop that down flush. Voila. This arm will go on the needle bar, and this area here will sit here. Probably easier to do it without talking a lot. So like I said, you can refer to other YouTube channels that give you much more detailed, and especially because your buttonholer may be totally different than this. This is how we set up a vintage buttonholer. And we give a little turn on the screw because this has a lot of vibration, so you want to make sure that everything is nice and tight. All right, we're ready to sew. What you want to do is take a piece of scrap fabric and test your setup. And that is because tension could be off. You just want to make double sure before you put it into your project, because picking those little tiny threads out is not fun. Trust me. Ask me how I know. So what I'm going to do for now is just drop this down. I'm going to turn my needle into the fabric, making sure that it went through that little hole in the plate. Everything is fine, and I'm again holding my threads. Now this is going to be noisy because it jostles back and forth, so I'm not going to talk as I'm going, but you'll see when I'm done what it looks like. I've just completed one go around. That was pretty quick, wasn't it? But on this particular mechanism, I like to run it twice. It just fills in the thread a little bit thicker. So go back around. Go slow. If you're a little nervous, makes ratchety sound. Okay, and when I get back to the beginning, I'm going to stop where I want to start for my next one. So let's turn our needle up. Pull out through the back and snip that thread right close. Because remember, we don't have any little hairs showing, right? Snip, snip. And have a beautiful buttonhole. So I flip it over, check the back. My tension looks good. You can do it a couple of times if you feel like you need to get the feel of the mechanism itself. We can set this aside and pick up our project. Now, to help you see, because this is such a busy print, I'm going to use the sample piece to show you the process. And then I will take it on the top and I will actually run some buttonholes on that. So where I started, the way I set my mechanism, my needle is going to come in right here at the pin. As far as width, I eyeball. You can draw a line if necessary, and that will help you center. But again, if you're making marks on your project, you want to have a heat-sensitive marker that will disappear when you're done. So now I'm going to take it under here. I'm going to put my needle in so that it is in the middle and right at this pin. Get my threads. All right. Here's my metal finger all the way back, my needle, and my pin. What I'm going to do is lower my needle and check right at the pin. That's where I want it. And you see I free-handed that line, but you can see there's a center mark here, and that tells me that my buttonholes will be consistently in the center of my band. So remove the pin, drop the presser foot, and I'm not going to speak because it's going to be noisy, but I'll take my threads, okay, that's once around. boom. That's twice around, and that's where I want to stop, because now I know when I move to my next buttonhole, it will start at the pin where I want it. And that's how you get your buttonholes evenly spaced. So here's what I do. I will turn my needle up, lift the presser foot, I pull back, and I go a little bit beyond the pin because I want slack in my thread, because I'm not going to clip those threads until I'm finished. It just speeds up the process. That's something I taught myself. I used to stop and clip threads after every buttonhole. It's not necessary. All right, here we go. And let's go one more. Okay, and we'll go up. So depending on how many buttonholes you have, you just rinse and repeat the whole way. All right, ready to clip those threads? And there we have 3 buttonholes. So however many you need for your project, you'll just continue on. Before I set this aside, I do want to take this time also to show you how I open. And very carefully, you can buy special tools, but a seam ripper works. But what you want to do is, starting at either end, doesn't matter which one, poke your seam ripper through and break the fabric in between. Instead of just slicing up with your seam ripper, you begin by poking a hole at both ends, like so. And what that does is ensure that once you slice in between your threads, you will not continue past. And do use self-control, go slow. You'll feel yourself hit that right there, and your buttonhole is open. You'll do that on all of them. You can trim up any little hairs. Remember, when you're sewing at home, you're going to be using the same color thread as your project for the most part, so we're not going to see little white hairs and such, but that's how we complete our buttonholes using the Vintage Singer. Now, I'm going to set this aside, so I'm ready to finish my project piece. And I have to admit that I did pre-sew a few of the buttonholes, but right now, you see my 3 pins here, I'm going to complete it. All right. Centered between the sides of the band, my needle in at the pin. That's twice around. Pull, over pull, so I have a little slack in the thread. Needle in at the pin. Remove the pin, drop the presser foot. The mechanism is doing the work. I'm not pulling on my fabric. Very important, because you will bend your needle and break it. You can do damage. Rinse and repeat. Needle in, pull the pin out, Drop the presser foot. This is just habit, the way I'm holding it. The mechanism is doing all the work. Voila. It's a little weird, it's on autopilot. I was just thinking about automatic, when you, the cars, new cars, you can take your hands off the wheel. Not me. I'm not doing it. No way am I trusting a vehicle like that. Okay, and so I have put in the final, so I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. And I'm not going to put a buttonhole in this particular top. I will not put one in the band because this is kind of heavy and I don't want to add any more weight to make that collar flop. That's just a little personal thing. And so clip your threads. Here's a little, let the shirt, the weight of the shirt pull down and just slide your scissor right down to the garment and you'll get it right close. Okay, and then with my handy dandy seam ripper, poke a hole at the top, poke a hole at the bottom, and carefully slide. And you have buttonholes in your top. So off camera, I will go ahead and complete that. I'm going to show you marking where your buttons go is very simple. Lining up your collar bands, slide down and making sure that they are even. That's about as perfect as it gets. Now I kind of creepy crawl my fingers along. Here is my first buttonhole. So I'm going to pinch there. So I'm going to put my pin in the middle, but it's going in on this side. I leave it there like that, and then I come down. Pin goes in at the middle of the buttonhole, slide down. You're going to do this all the way for every buttonhole. Okay, but for our purposes, that's enough to show you. Then I pull it away like so. And now I just poke the pin through so it will stay. And now I have my button placement. I'm not going to go over any particular button tips right now because we're finishing this project today. We're going to put a playlist together for this so you can hit the playlist and see the entire video series from beginning to end. Our next series, we're going to start basic sewing tips. We're kind of going to pull back a little bit. And I will be talking about different types of buttons and ways to sew them on securely, because there are some tips concerning that. But for now, I'm going to trust that you can handle figuring out buttons on your own. I hope this helped you. I hope this encouraged you. I want you to know that it does not have to be scary. Making a garment to fit yourself, you can have the certain pattern that we talked about by simply using a garment that you've already worn, taking it apart, and that will cut out so much frustration. And then step by step, I hope I've given you enough tips and demonstrated to show you, just with patience and repeated effort, you can sew like a pro at home. And if your first projects don't look like they came out of a store, off a store rack. Let me tell you something I know. Before I learned how to write, somebody put a fat crayon in my hand. And I had no skill, no dexterity in my fingers. I just took that fat crayon and scribbled. My mother thought it was art. But after I got comfortable with that, I got a skinny crayon and I learned how to color within the lines. And once I learned that, and I was learning my letters, I was given a pencil. And I was taught how to carefully print letters. And after I had done that for a while and gotten good at that, I was given a pen and I was taught how to write in cursive, continuous flowing letters. I did not write in cursive in kindergarten because I needed the steps, repeated work at each level to train my fingers how to hold the instruments and refine it as I grew older and I had more control and I grew more comfortable. That is how we sew. If you are just starting today and you think you're going to sit down and you may do well, but don't be frustrated if you make mistakes along the way. That's how you learn. Make a mistake, learn from it, and don't repeat the mistake again. After you've done it 100 times, it gets easy. Whether it's buttonholes, zippers, whatever. Don't let fear stop you. Just do it. I hope you're inspired, I hope you're encouraged, and we'll be back to see you again soon. God bless.